Hello, my name is Shelagh and I am the owner and artist here at Stuart Moore Textiles. We are a natural dye studio based on the east coast of the United States. Stuart Moore Textiles specializes in plant-dyed embroidery floss and fabric. We have all different kinds of flosses, including in cotton, traditional, and cotton tapestry thread, and we also do a lot of wool and silk flosses and a line of linen floss. For my craft therapy video with Tadan, I want to show you how I use Visible Mending to cover a stain on one of my vintage sweaters. Let's get started. Here's what you're going to need: a pair of scissors, a darning needle which has an eye that's large enough for your wool to pass through and has a dull point. You'll also need some darning wool. You should choose a wool that is the same content as the garment you are mending. So for example, if you were choosing to mend a wool sweater, you'll want to pick some wool mending floss. It should be in a similar or lighter weight than the garment that you are mending. This is a stain I want to cover on my vintage sweater. It's not a large area, so this mend should be pretty quick. I'm going to start by cutting 6 strands of differently colored floss that I want to work with. I am cutting each of these at a 12-inch length or about 30 centimeters. I've chosen colors that are contrasting enough to stand out but still look really good together. I'm going to start with my first 2 lengths of thread, threading my needle with both of them at the same time. I'm going to hold them double so when I am working, there are 4 threads that I am using simultaneously. I'm going to start in the bottom right hand corner of the area I want to cover, just to the right and below my stain. I'm going to enter my needle off to the side and poke it out at the bottom of the V of the first stitch I want to cover. This is my stitch, as you can see right here, the V, and where my needle is coming out is the bottom of that V in the center. I'm going to leave a long tail of my yarns off to the side. We'll worry about these later. This technique is called duplicate stitch. I'm going to duplicate each stitch in my garment that I want to cover. I'm going to follow the stitch up to the right hand side of my V, behind the stitch above it, and back down to where I began. This is 1/2 of my duplicate stitch finished, and now I'm just going to finish it down the left hand side, poking my needle into the same place where I began to finish my stitch, and poking it out at the center of the next stitch to start my next stitch. There's my first V stitch finished. And now I'm just going to do the exact same thing, following the stitch of my garment up the right hand side, behind the stitches above, and then back down into the same hole where I began. And when I'm finished with my row, I'm just going to pop my needle off to the side, thread my final stitch all the way through, and then again, just like when I started, I'm going to leave a long tail. With my next set of threads, I'm going to repeat the same steps for my previous row, threading my needle with 2 colors and holding it double for my next row. As you make your second set of duplicate stitches, make sure you are stitching through the loops you have created in the last row of stitches. As you can see, I'm entering off to the side and poking my needle through the center of my previous row of stitches, which is the base of the first stitch in my second row. Again, I'm just going to work from right to left, duplicating all of the stitches in my garment as I did in the previous row. I think this technique seems intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually quite simple. If you're a knitter and are familiar with how stitches work, you won't have any trouble picking up this technique right away. When you have finished, flip your garment over and pull the loose mending threads to the back side of your garment. Taking these ends one or two at a time, with your darning needle, weave them into the back side of your garment behind your mend so that it can't be seen from the front of your garment. Just a few stitches in one direction and then one or two back stitches is enough to keep your darning stitches securely in place. And when you are done, this is what it will look like. No more stain, just a lot of glorious color. I think this is a really gorgeous technique, and I love adding these to my garment. Thank you everybody for watching my tutorial on visible mending. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to answer them. And I hope you use this technique on your own clothing to fix up holes and stains. Thanks guys, thanks for tuning in.